morning. Thank you so much, Larry, for the introduction. It's really great to be here, and we're very proud of this accomplishment. It truly was a collaborative effort on the part of myself and two retired old kindergarten teachers, but both teachers, Linda Hart-Hewins and my mom, Una Villiers, who we worked closely to publish this book, two exemplary kindergarten teachers who really understood and understand the process of children playing and children's work being their play. So I thank you for opening the door to have me come and speak to you today, because really with Linda and myself and with Una, we teased that it was over a decade of experience, that I had worked with kids for 20 years and each of them for what they wouldn't admit to as 40 plus years, but really that we've been in a lot of classrooms, worked with a lot of kindergarten teachers, as literacy coordinators, as principals, and as consultants, and have a wealth of knowledge that we really could put together to share with kindergarten teachers in Ontario and beyond to make a difference for little kids. So we're really excited to have the book put together. To begin, the first line of the book I think encapsulates where we're going with it. Today's kindergarten classrooms welcome children that are part of a really rapidly changing world that's accompanied by exploding technologies, and teachers really must meet these challenges and provide all children with an inviting environment that honors their individual differences, respects their developmental levels, and stimulates children to learn. That's a really massive challenge that we're facing now. And I think with the new trends in education, with all-day kindergarten programs, with a push towards early literacy development in classrooms, how are teachers going to make this happen? It's a tall order, and it's definitely something that we are equipped to do. We see in the book, and the perspective is that active engagement and play have always been what's paramount in young children's learning. And I think we've gotten away from that in a lot of classrooms that I see, and kids are working on worksheets. And that therein lay what the title was all about, that the journey to literacy does not have to require a worksheet, and that we can do something bigger and better for kids to make these rich environments possible. The three of us working together, thinking about what were the limitations of worksheets and how can we kind of move away from that. I've always felt that it was either too easy, too hard, or just right. And if it was too easy for the kids, then what was the point? If it was too hard for them, we are never about turning kids off when they come to school. And if it was just right, then why are we doing it also? Because we're not really extending them and pulling them into the new domains that we want them to be a part of in their literacy development. So in the beginning parts of the book, and there isn't a lot of theory in it, there's a lot of practical ideas and practical suggestions for kindergarten classrooms. But there is a section where we were really diving into what are the limitations? Why is it better to do it in a sort of template-based, activity-based way as opposed to using a worksheet? So one that I slipped out of the book was, if you go back to the kind of the original circle the things that start with C, and assuming that they look and are drawn like things that start with C to start with, it's such a limited opportunity. You know, did they by accident circle the things that started with C, or do the same thing as the person beside them, or just circle a whole bunch of things? It's really just one thing that you can diagnose, and it addresses one developmental level and really requires only one response. So in contrast, in a play-based, activity-based kind of way, if kids are writing about the cat that moved in next door, and they're not circling the C, but they're writing I-L-V-C-A-T-S as the examples there. So now I've got something diagnostic. I know they've got initial and final consonants. I know they're using spaces between the words. I know I need to work a little bit on upper and lower case. I know I've got some opportunities for punctuation. So it's a diagnostic thing. It's helping me move forward with that child into their process of literacy development. So many different levels, inviting so many different responses, and finally it's driven by the learner. It's not driven by the teacher. So as I say, it's not full of a lot of theories. The book is full of a lot of practical ideas, but what it does lay out in the beginning chapters is sort of what are the limitations, and I think that's really important for teachers who are trying to move away from doing more of worksheet-based things and trying to move into an active-based program. And I think it's also important for talking to parents, talking to communities about the ways in which the children in these activity-based programs are learning. What is it that they're doing? So I think that's helpful for teachers. So we have been asked ourselves, how can we really run a successful play-based program that's promoting literacy development in a kindergarten classroom. What's it going to look like? What's it going to sound like? What's it going to taste like? And how will it work? So that's what the book addresses. In the initial chapter, we're talking about creating an environment, which is huge. That the organization of the classroom be centers. That the centers include a reading center, a writing center, a visual arts, painting, drawing, writing spot, a home dramatic play center, sand and water. It's not up in the hallway because there isn't space for it in the classroom. This is part of the center-based classroom and the construction center where there are big blocks and lots of materials for the children to use. There's a gathering center. All that in the book is described with sort of question and answer kind of a format, as well as a gathering center for kids to share materials with the teacher. Routines, so key. Routines, having 4 aprons at the water center to be sure that children know that that's where 4 people go. Those routines are built in with the teacher in classroom meetings, with initial introductions, slowly and gently from the beginning of the year. Timetable is always of issue, and we suggest many in the book that might be of use. One in particular that I've always loved is dividing the day into 2 separate activity periods. Oftentimes teachers feel in kindergarten classrooms as busy 4- and 5-year-olds around the room that there's so much going on, it's hard to be in all these different places and hard to be talking and listening and writing and reading with the children when they're busy and they're active. Sometimes considering closing some of the centers for some of the period of time works. So for one activity period, certain centers would be open and others would be closed. And for a second activity period, the reverse would happen. I really found this works in my classroom for so many reasons. The children who tend to gravitate to a particular center don't have that choice at one period or another. And in the other instances, it makes the classrooms bigger. The place where you are doing writing activities with children now becomes a place where they can build in that second construction kind of math, science, building time. So that's outlined in the book, which I think has been really helpful for teachers. Sometimes the organization of the classroom and the giving over of the ownership to kids is hard to consider from the beginning of the year. How do we build that in and introduce things gently and slowly to the kids so they take ownership for these things and the classroom becomes their own? That's outlined in some of the first day things in the initial chapter. The second chapter addresses whole class literacy activities. So things that we're doing as a group, keeping them short, keeping them relevant, keeping them meaningful. Shared reading activities, shared writing activities, information about borrow a book programs and how that might work in the classroom in different ways it's worked in various classrooms we've run and visited, as well as buddy reading programs and how that might work in a kindergarten classroom. So the initial chapters include those kinds of things, and then a breakdown of the following 3 through 9 chapters, really diving into the different centers and what is it that's happening at these centers that can promote literacy. And the framework inside each one of those chapters repeats itself. So the initial ideas, I'm going to not go to water yet. The initial idea was that how can you introduce this center? A new center like a construction center or water or sand, how can you introduce it? What materials are there for the children to use and how do they change throughout the course of the year? What literacy activities can you infuse into that center? What kinds of questions are teachers asking about how they can use this center? And what milestones? What is the teacher looking for to know that, yes, these children are developing the important literacy skills that I want them to develop? So what am I looking for as a milestone at that center? So that's the breakdown in all 6 of the chapters dealing with each individual center. So what I thought I'd do for you is just dive into one particular chapter, let you see how that unfolds, and then you'll have an idea of how the rest of the book looks. So if we look at how to incorporate literacy into the water center, how would that start out? So introducing it. Always books and poems and charts are wonderful ways to introduce it. I always think of kids wanting to connect ideas wanting to think tangentially, wanting to try to integrate their learning. So if you're introducing a water center, then reading books about water and having those books available at the water center. In the book, we also talk about selecting books carefully. I think it's really easy to just be grabbing a book that you read to a group of children, but it needs to be a book that's appropriate to develop the kinds of skills that you want to develop in literacy in the kindergarten classroom. So for example, choosing books that really beautifully have illustrations that match the text, having strong storyline or having really predictable text for them to chime in with, having as this one, Wide-Mouthed Frog, has in the last page, where he jumps in the pond with and the huge word splash is splashed across the page. So really not needing a worksheet to have that SP blend, but having that experience right there in the text where they can chime in. So many wonderful authors that can make wonderful author tables that we tried to focus on in the book as well, so you have places to go. Not all the books are hot off the press, and I think that's really important, that they're available and accessible in school libraries, that multiple copies and big books are listed and suggested as well. So I think that's really important, that all those components are available in the kindergarten setting. What materials are we going to use? Now, sometimes in the water center, it's going to be this gorgeous water table, but it doesn't have to be. It can be as simple as a Rubbermaid bin, a bin that's accessible for the children, that they can take ownership around. In the book, there's also some diagrams of possible things that would be available at the center, at their eye level, for them to take responsibility and ownership for: clipboards, writing materials, interesting graduated cylinders and things, those kinds of things that would be available throughout the year. So if you think about introducing the center, using those literacy kind of components to introduce it, what materials are available, what kinds of literacy can we infuse into the water center, what kinds of materials can we change up over the course of the year. Now, the book in each chapter has many, many examples of kinds of things that could be added to the centers to change them and enhance them, but I think the key is putting things in that are gonna get kids to talk, gonna get them to talk so that they can write, so that they can read, so that all of those skills can be infused. So starting with some examples, and we say in the book that there are so many, it would never be the expectation that you would cover all of these in the course of a year, but that you would follow the interests of the kids. And that maybe it would be inspired by a book. For example, reading a book like I Love Boats, making a chart together at a conferencing whole group class time, when you might make a list of all the different kinds of boats, might label those with pictures, might turn them into a concentration game or a bingo game that would all be added to the water center. Maybe having children who can obviously talk about what they're doing at the water center, but maybe record it. Maybe recording the things that we're thinking, the things that we're floating. Maybe making them float when they sink by putting them into a boat. So those kinds of infusions into the water center can turn it into something completely different for a short period or a long period of time, depending on the interests of the children. Sometimes something neat from a science store or just duct tape can make a wonderful experience in a bottle. And the children generate so much descriptive vocabulary about the things that they're doing. Photographs can be a really great way to encapsulate that, and then to have them be able to share and talk about what they've done and what they're doing in the water center. So many lists of things that could be made. It could be on charts. It could be in a small book form, as this little girl's done. We made a list in the class of all the different places that you find water, and she says water is in her hot tub. So that was a class book that they made. It could be individual books, and again, it could be lists that are available for them to reference at the water table about uses of water or places where they might find water. The idea of turning the water center into an aquarium could begin with the reading of a book, could begin with a child's visit to an aquarium. So many different models that can be purchased to add to the center, labeled for reference in terms of literacy, reading and writing, and tidy up opportunities. Sometimes the pet store can be a really neat reference for finding real things that can be added to have them turn it into an aquarium. Drawing pictures of the things that they've made, labeling them, all wonderful literacy opportunities there. Sometimes finding little models of pond life things can turn the water center into a pond. This little one's written, I found 5 tadpoles, and again, so different diagnostic with him that you need to work on spaces between the words. In this instance, he's got a lot of initial and final consonants. This little guy's made a sequencing of life in the pond as well. Sometimes turning it into a swimming center, singing the swimming pool song, having materials at the water center for them to make their own signs, that the swimming pool is closed, that it's being cleaned, that there's no food allowed, all those kinds of materials at the water table for them to use. Sometimes the Playmobil things can be a good addition as well, because there's some of the natural floating devices and lounge chairs and things that can turn it into a swimming center. Of course, exploring capacity in so many different graduated cylinders and cups and things that can be added, but it's also nice to include some less standard things like a glove, plastic glove, or a Ziploc bag, and explore the component of water or of liquids that they take the shape of their container. Again, opportunities to talk about it, to read about it, to write about it, and to record their findings. Can turn in the water table into a rainbow of bottles. I've asked the kids in the past to just bring in lots of different bottles using food coloring, and this can make a gorgeous display on a window. Maisie's Rainbow Dream is a great way to introduce it, and sometimes they can record what they've done. So the blue plus the red equaled the purple, and that's a wonderful way for them to be recording what they're finding, poetry and songs that can be listed on chart paper for their reference as well. Can turn the room into a water literacy spot. So many different kinds of shapes and styles of soap that they can bring in to change the water table, the consistency of the water, to talk about the different sizes and shapes and smells of different things. Really, it's about infusing something that excites them into the water table. It doesn't have to be just about graduated cylinders. It can be about so much. If they're excited, they're going to want to read, they're going to want to write, and they're going to want to record what they've done. Playing with bubbles in the water, making bubble wands out of so many different things, strawberry baskets, pipe cleaners. Sometimes this can be a great activity to move outside. So you see that the possibilities with infusion of different materials of what you can turn one center into with books, with charts, with other props and materials. The suggestion is made in the book that you have a place to keep all these things, so that when the children are doing this wonderful work at the sand or in the water and the construction blocks, that they are taking photographs of what they're doing, they're recording what they're doing, and that can all be collated into a book that this little girl said, science is trees and flowers and snakes and rocks and dinosaurs, so I made them all in the front of my science book. This is something that they can share with the entire group when we're having celebration times in the middle of the day, at the end of the day, before and after activity times, and a real way to stimulate kids to want to share what they've done and to stimulate others to want to do the same in these centers. So the next section of each chapter is about commonly asked questions from teachers. So in terms of the water center, what about the safety? And one of the things that came up in the book was, changing the water table and changing the water that's in it. Big job every day. How do we address these kinds of things? And it can turn into another opportunity for kids to read and write and record. If you don't have a parent that's changing the water table, you don't have a grade 6 that can come in, but you do have yourself that could empty it, and them that can make predictions about how many scoops it's going to take to fill it up the next day, writing that down, and then checking it out once they do fill the water table. The tidy up, many suggestions in the book about making sure that things are traced around, things are labeled, things are organized for their return to a particular spot, and that the role of the teacher is key. That they are at these centers, they are talking with kids, they're extending the learning, and then they're supporting them in recording many of these ideas, which is their opportunity to work on all those wonderful literacy skills that we want to instill. Parents need to understand. And in the book, there's many suggestions about newsletters, about possible inviting into the classroom, about photograph displays to help parents to really understand what it is that we're doing in the classroom. And if it's not a worksheet that I can take home and I can see what it is my child is or isn't learning, then what is it and how can I understand and support at home? The last section of each chapter is really important and I think helpful for teachers in focusing what it is that they're looking for when they're working with children at these different centers. So for instance, if our children using language to label and describe and retell the things that they're doing, can I see evidence of their growth literacy-wise? Are children making neat connections to what they're doing and the world? Are they referring to the books that are available there at each center? Are they writing narratives? Are they making signs to add to their work? And are they recording these really great discoveries that they're making at each center? So that gives you a framework of what each chapter looks like and a snapshot of what kinds of activities or suggestions are being made for teachers to extend and enrich each of these center-based approaches. So who would be interested? I really think for new kindergarten teachers, this book has been really supportive and helpful. For teachers that are moving into a kindergarten environment, if they've worked in a primary or even in a junior environment and they wanted to be working with kindergarten children, I think this would be helpful. If you're thinking of moving away from moving towards using more of a center-based approach and less worksheets, I think it would be helpful. And of course, for those of us who work with teachers and kindergarten teachers, this can be of real resource. So the three of us worked tirelessly, and we're really proud of what came out. And I think so far it's been really well received amongst educators. I know the teachers and principals and superintendent and people that I work with have all been really positive about it. Canadian Teacher gave it some really nice reviews, which was exciting, that it was a really organized, readable book, and that it could be used for kindergarten teachers and beyond. And the one that I'm proud of, another magazine was saying that we have a dynamic resource that has a plethora. That's all right. Plethora of practical ideas, and really that it does mesh with where the Ontario curriculum is going around kindergarten, and that it's child-centered, child-friendly, activity-based. So I thank you for the opportunity to share what we worked really hard on, and I hope that it will be valuable for you and to people that you work with. So thank you.